devices. So at 6 o'clock, I call this meeting of Saginaw City Council to order. Please rise for the pledges. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. Please be seated. Item number 2 is the invocation. For that, our friend Pastor Dennis Hudson. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the privilege. And let's pray. Our gracious Father and God, we come today thankful for air conditioning. Lord, it's such a blessed thing to have when it's 100 degrees outside. We appreciate you inspiring someone to invent it. Lord, we thank you that we can be in a place like this where we have people with a heart to serve. We thank you for this city council and all the employees. Lord, you've given us a great city. And we realize that sometimes, even in great cities, when things are growing, we don't always like the change. Forgive us for that. Help us to be patient. Help us to be kind to one another. Help us to be a city where people look forward to visiting. More than anything, Father, we want to come this evening and ask that you would bless the city through the leadership and through those that are here. Just help us to be the place that you designed us to be. A community of brothers and sisters who help each other out. Father, we ask this because you're a great God and you can do many things. But we also ask this because we seek your blessings. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Reverend. Item number 3 is audience participation. That's covered on the screen. You're welcome to talk at any listed agenda item. Please see the city secretary. Item number 4 is the consent agenda. A is action regarding minutes, August 6, 2019. B is approval of minutes, August 10th, 2019. C, approval of minutes, August 13th, 2019. D, action authorizing city manager to execute an agreement with Spectrum Enterprise to provide internet connection services to the depot. E is action regarding appointment of Crime Control and Prevention District Board of Directors for members with terms expiring September 1st. We are going to pull item F. It will be covered at a subsequent council meeting, so we're only discussing A through E. I will entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve consent agenda items A, B, C, D, and E as presented.
Thank you, Patrick. Cindy, second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Those opposed, let the record reflect we do have a quorum. Mayor Pro Tem Valerie Tankersley is out this evening. Moving on. Item number 5. Item number 5 is consideration action on approval of an ordinance authorizing the issuance and sale of City of Saginaw, Texas Limited Tax Note Series 2019. For that, City Manager Gabe Rayam.
Mayor and Council, tonight for your review and action would be the issue of a tax note in the amount of $2 million. So there are specific projects that are related to this amount. About $1.6 million of the total would be designated for land purchases for future facilities, paving, parking lot expansion at our police department, as well as paying for some playground upgrades and a few other things. Andrew Friedman is here from Samco to talk about the very favorable interest rates. Bond counsel Leroy Grounder is here to answer any questions you may have. So with that, Andrew will talk you through.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Andrew Friedman with Samco Capital Markets, serve as your financial advisor. We're in the market yesterday. The private placement of these tax notes, $2 million, passed out in front of you the results of that competitive bid process. Very pleased with the results, very much lower interest rates than what we were contemplating being able to lock in at this meeting this evening. First National Bank Texas out of Killeen submitted the low bid, 1.4% fixed rate for 7 years. I think we've been running numbers at roughly 2.25%. You can see that we received 10 bids, which is a great turnout, more than we would typically see. And you can see that the 32 basis points better than the second place bid. So we feel very confident that we're getting the absolute best deal in the market possible for the city. Very pleased with that result. A couple of things have happened since we last met, and most of you, I'm sure, are well aware of it. The markets are in a bit of turmoil right now. Last week, we briefly had an inverted yield curve, meaning that short-term interest rates were higher than long-term interest rates. And the 30-year Treasury bonds dropped below 2% for the first time ever. So we've seen interest rates fall off of a cliff in the last 2 weeks. Fears about recession, which is what an inverted yield curve has historically meant when short-term rates are higher than long-term rates. Economists believe that a recession is coming. They've eased off those fears a little bit. We'll obviously see how that plays out over time. The trade war with China obviously being a driver in that conversation as well. The city stands to benefit from that as a debt borrower, just as any of us who borrow money from time to time would be. So we're pleased to present that 1.4%. Behind that are the final numbers on September 17th. If you take affirmative action this evening, you'd see $1,957,000 deposited into the project fund on September 17th. Behind that, you can see the amortization schedule of these tax notes, first maturing March of 2020 and finally maturing in March of 2026 at that fixed rate of 1.4%. These tax notes would not be callable prior to their final maturity. Really don't see a benefit to having a call option. Some of the bids that we did receive, the bidders submitted a secondary bid with a call option. The interest rates on those carried a higher interest rate, given how low these interest rates are if you choose to adopt these and sell these tax notes. It's very unlikely that you would ever want to refund them, and certainly given that short-term yields are higher than longer-term yields, the money that you would have to pay off these tax notes would be better invested in your other funds rather than used to prepay this debt. So we decided to forego any call optionality with these tax notes. I'm happy to go into the process in more depth for you. Certainly, Mr. Grauender, your legal counsel, would be happy to answer any legal questions that you have about this process. Happy to answer any questions, and I turn it over to you, Mr. Mayor.
Council, what questions do you have for Mr. Friedman or any of the folks involved in this process? Good. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. All right. If I don't have any other questions, no concerns, I will entertain a motion on this item, item number 5. It is at the very end of the subject.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I make a motion
Thank you.
that we approve the ordinance authorizing the issuance and sale of City of Saginaw, Texas Limited Tax Note Series 2019, which is ordinance number 2019-13. Do I need to read the rest?
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Charlie, second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed? Thank you. Thank you, folks. Good work. Item number 6. Item number 6 is presentation of effective tax rate and action to place adoption of proposed tax rate on September 17th agenda and to schedule public hearings on September 3rd and September 10th. For that, City Manager Gabe Graham.
Mr. Mayor, this is a requirement from the state of Texas that we do public notification of our tax rates as well as hold public hearings. So this item will show the effective tax rate, which is the tax rate that raises the same amount of revenue on the same properties as the previous year, adjusted for value changes. We will, based on our discussion with the council at the budget workshop, will notice our rate as the rollback tax rate. The direction from the council majority was that staff would pursue a lower rate, about a penny lower than the rollback tax rate, making some changes that will come forward to you at one of these hearings. But if there's any questions specifically about the rate, happy to answer them. And if not, the public hearings will be scheduled for the dates noted. We would be on course to adopt both the tax rate and the FY20 budget on September 17th.
All right. Council, questions? Patrick? No? All right, so my understanding is our tax rate we'll notice the 469, but the tax rate that we're going to go with will be 459? Okay. And that will be finalized when?
Mayor, this item is, we are required to say that we are going to have 2 public hearings. They'll be scheduled for the 3rd and the 10th, and then we will adopt the budget as well as the tax rate on September 17th. So this item is just formally stating that this is our intention. The notice will be published in the paper as required on Thursday.
But the notice will say 469.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Based on the direction that y'all gave us at the budget workshop, we're advertising at the highest 469, but as you will hear in our next council meeting on the 3rd, we have made changes to the proposed budget based on a tax rate of 0.459.
Okay, so the next council meeting, September 3rd, we'll discuss that and have the details for the
Yes,
459 budget.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you, Kim. All right, council, other questions? If no other questions, I will entertain a motion to place these on the agenda to adopt this proposed tax rate and to place them on the agenda for the 3rd and the 10th.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we schedule the hearings as requested by staff.
Okay. Second? Cindy, second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Those opposed? All right, excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, staff. Moving on. Item number 7, consideration action regarding employee insurance benefits for 2019-2020. For that, Director of Human Resources, Melanie McManus. Welcome, Melanie.
Good evening. Earlier this month, the Insurance Committee reviewed the options available by the broker, and we are recommending that we stay with United Healthcare and offer the 3 plans that you'll have in y'all's packet: the 100% copay plan, the HSA plan, and the alternate copay plan, the 80/20 plan. And then also continuing the dental coverage with United Healthcare and staying with Standard Life for the life policy. And if y'all have any questions.
Council questions for Melanie? So this has all been vetted by the staff committee, right, already?
Yes.
That's what the recommendation they have?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
We'll tell them we appreciate their hard work.
Okay.
I know y'all worked hard to get the best rate. I'm sorry it's going up like this, but that's sort of the business we're in. But
Yes.
thanks for the good efforts.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Just to clarify, this is the plan that yields the roughly $250,000 cost increase? Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we'll entertain a motion on item number 7.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we accept plan recommendations by staff.
Thank you, Patrick. Charlie, second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Those opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Melanie. All right, at this point, I'm going to call an audible. We're going to move agenda items around. We're going to skip down to the executive session. We'll do that, then we will come back and do item 8 and recess into workshops. We will not skip any item, but we're going to do the executive session first, as our attorney needs to leave early. So at 6:14, we're in executive session. Pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071, private use of city logo. We will return.
Oh. I may not need it. I'll see how much battery juice I have here. Let's see what it tells me now.
All right, so at 6:29, reconvene back from executive session. Then also at 6:29, we'll recess into workshop, item 8. Item 9 is the multi-year financial plan review. And for that, I think we have Lewis McLean.
Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome.
And I will be 1 second more getting, you only gave me 15 minutes to get ready, and I was talking, yes.
Gabe, anything you want to say while Lewis is getting ready? You want a preamble?
Dearly beloved, no. We the people. Yeah, that reminds me of 4th grade. I think I had to memorize that. So, kind of big picture, the idea, and Lewis last came before you, I believe, in May, is that whatever adopted budget we end up with the council will kind of set the first year of a multi-year financial plan. Lewis is examining a number of pieces of that plan, and it will be ongoing. We'll make adjustments related to a number of ratios, which he'll talk about, and as we continue to grow, and also approach potentially a bond election in May. So this is all kind of part of the planning to move us forward.
Okay, it should be coming up. It is a pleasure to be here, and I would like to start off with a couple of comments about my approach and let's see. Okay. What I would ask if I could do is let me go through my presentation, and when I get to the end, I will have Councilman Farr's 3 slides in this presentation, and then I will respond to that, and then let any of you respond to anything that I present to you. And this is a continuation, and I did put the May presentation, I just added to it. I knew we had one council member, and I am going to some degree, make sure that I cover the bases as if everyone is new, just because I don't want to make the assumption that anything that I've said in the past is still fresh on your mind. You may recall my last presentation started with this comment, and I will reiterate it tonight, and that is, I see my assignment is to do everything I can to help Saginaw in every way that I can. As you know, I'm not a resident here. I am a consultant, but my presentation is independent. I did not ask, actually I did not ask, and no one told me to change anything from what I'm presenting tonight. So, my goal will be to provide a framework for all of you. One of the things that we're going to do is look at some numbers historically in the context that I think is the right, proper way to evaluate historical data. And then we're going to use some of that information to go forward with not a detailed forecast. Kim and I are working at a very, very granular level, one that would bore you probably. It may even confuse you because it's too granular. And when it all is rolled up, I'm trying to introduce a vernacular in a way for you to communicate to the staff, sort of some parameters. I will say it probably more than once tonight. I don't like the word caps for a very good reason, but you'll notice in my presentation I use the word constraints, and I use not caps, but I use goals or parameters. One of the things I would caution you again is ever putting the city in a situation where the flexibility to make decisions is removed. It just doesn't make any sense at all. And we're living in a time actually right now where not only is sustainability used more and more often, but also resilience. This week there were 6 or 8 articles on ransomware hitting 23 cities in Texas. They didn't name the cities, but one city did put out a press release. So if you haven't in the past, you will in the future be getting questions from the rating agencies, not just about how are you protected, but how can you overcome, how can you get back in business if you have a ransomware attack. So my target audience is actually the whole council, especially the newer members, and actually the citizens as a whole. Any citizen, all citizens, especially wanting a fair and proper perspective on telling the accurate sales tax or property tax story. And what I will advocate, and then I will show you, to me the only fair and accurate way to measure properly the tax revenues is compute the tax levy per capita and then adjust it for inflation. Those are two drivers of cost. One that you don't control, well actually to some extent you don't control either one of them, or if you try to control the one that you can control, that will end up with a lot of headaches as well as lawsuits. And I call inflation the great thief, and it really is. It really means we're paying more for the same thing we used to get, or in the future we're going to pay more. And interesting enough, the state comptroller produces a Texas CPI, and it's really only equal about 1.77% a year on a compounded basis. Now, I don't know about you, but the official national inflation target is 2%, and I do know that my personal CPI is much greater than 2%, much greater than 1.77%. Maybe not for you. But I also know that the national CPI has been changed. I've heard different numbers, 14 or 15 times in the last 20 years. And every time it's changed to produce a lower number. Why? A couple of reasons. Social Security checks that's based on the CPI is one of those. So the tax levy per capita has risen from $274.40 to $430.76 from 2009 through fiscal 2020, and that's with an estimated 2% in 2020. So that turns out to be a compounded annual growth rate of 4.18%. However, when you adjust that for CPI, the rise would be, and I'm stating it in 2020 dollars, so that means I'm taking the 2009 dollars and adjusting them to the current level. And then that compounded rate is more like 2.37%. I know Councilman Farr is going to pick on me on this statement, and I'm going to reserve it to the end. I'm not going to skip it by any means, but I'm going to reserve it so we can make that part of our conversation. Now, even when you look at the 2.37%, there are a lot of reasons for that, and you just approved one tonight. I don't know what that is in terms of percentage, but that's one item. But all employee compensation increases, some that are built in, some that are just to market, some that you don't control very much, such as health insurance, which is in a runaway situation and has been for years. So we have those kinds of items, and you've got contractual items, and you've got maintenance costs. You've got all of these things that are in the budget, and, you know, for the most part, if you buy the exact same quantity of materials from one year to the next, you're likely to pay more. So not just because of inflation, but because it's been redone, it's better, it's more effective, all of those good reasons. Also, there's a lot of things that didn't exist anymore. A lot of city managers have this conversation when they have been in the business for a long time, and they'll go, just think of the things that we didn't have just a few years ago. I've listed a few like tasers, body cameras, open records requests, and those kinds of things. But that is part of why things get to be more expensive. In fact, many cities are already in their second round of body cameras. So guess what? They've got 50 body cameras, and they're replacing them with 50 body cameras. But now the technology has changed, and the recording media has changed, and you can just guess. Same 50 cameras, same 50 number of cameras, but a different type, a better one, better this, better that, more expensive. So let's see if I can... So if we go forward, did I do this wrong? I'm sorry. Yeah. So as we go forward, what I'm going to be showing you with numbers that I've blown up to be a little bit easier to read than was in the presentation you might have been sent, is what if you said to the staff, let's talk about some planning parameters. I wrote this not just for new council members, I wrote this as if I was the council member, and I was wanting to communicate, and I was wanting to be fair, and basically said, let's go forward with $430.76 per capita. Not as a cap, more as a goal, and at least to see if we could maintain the same level that we have right now. And then let's adjust it for population. If anyone thinks you can add 300 homes in a year and that not turn into more patrol districts, more fire calls, EMS calls, it's connected. Population, as I told you last time, drives everything. So let's do this. Gabe, let's plan at least with some basic parameters or constraints, as I'm fond of saying, $430.76. In other words, the same dollar amount per capita in 2020 that you're adopting a budget for. But let's adjust it for population, and then let's adjust it for actual, if we're looking back, or expected inflation as we're going forward. So when we look at the tax rate, I really do think the amount of time all councils spend chasing tax rates, rollback rates, effective rates. I told y'all actually 3 years ago when I was here on a truth and taxation assignment for you, it's confusing. I don't even know that it's meaningful. It's gotten so convoluted, but it's a rabbit hole. You go down that rabbit hole, and then you end up realizing a better way is, what is the tax levy? The tax levy is the base times the rate. That's what really matters. How much money are we getting in the levy? And then what is that per capita and so forth. So if we were to look at that, you would see that your tax base per capita, if we were to base that on those things that I mentioned, and a 45.90 tax rate, you've come down on the tax rate, but that's not a bragging right. That is not meaningful at all. Big deal. If your property tax values doubled, your tax rate would probably be cut significantly. That's not a bragging right if your tax levy is in fact bigger, especially on a per capita basis. So, Gabe, let's go forward with a 10-year plan. Actually, it's 11 years. But let's constrain it with the tax rate itself going or staying at 45.9. Now, I actually want to get to my handout for you in a minute, but let me just tell you, we looked at tax rate split, which is right now 61.36 going to the general fund, 38.64 going to the debt service fund, and in this case, I am going to show you what happens if that stays the same. You know, we had a conversation before about, oh no, let's don't let that get too close to 40% debt. And, but at the same time, that's admirable if we can do it, but remember we're balancing the two. The taxpayer writes a check and doesn't know and probably doesn't care how much of that is general fund versus debt service. What does that mean to the average citizen? In fact, the tax rate is split. You legally adopt a split tax rate, and you legally separate those. But when they get the tax bill, they don't get a general fund tax bill and a debt service. So now I'm going to show you how there's really some good news in, even though these are constrained, and I'll show you how. I'm going to show you on paper, and if you will pass down, and you got one coming your way. I think I have one for every staff member and one for every council member. And I'm going to go to my version of this. If this has the appearance, does this look familiar to you? If this has the appearance of a football coach game plan, then good, that's what I meant for it to look like. And I used to offend people when I was younger by putting too many tiny numbers on the page until my eyesight got bad. And so now I'm the first one to say, I've got to be able to see this. So this is a game plan. And what I want you to be able to notice here is in the green, number one, you should be looking at the yellow, the one that's got the yellow on top. And it's laid out where you flip it this way so you don't cut your neighbor next to you. Putting growth history into perspective. So what I've done is I've started back in 2009, and I extracted some numbers from your audited financial statements. Actually, they're in the statistical section, which is not a part of the audit, but it's very carefully done each year. And then I've got the 2019 year, the year we're in, and then 2020, which is tying to the budget that's in front of you, or will be in front of you. I gave a breakdown that I could find. It's reasonably defined, but obviously within the police department, you can't see how many are captains and sergeants and so forth. But if you really just go down to where it says total, you will see 141 positions in 2009. By the way, these are full-time equivalents. So part-time people were counted as half, it is half. So one thing you might do is you would look and you go, oh my goodness, we have gone from 141 people to 155 people in 10 years or 11 years. And that's the way some people push looking at historical data with an, oh my gosh, look how much we've grown, look how fat we've gotten. However, if you put those positions on a full-time equivalent per 1,000 population, in 2009 you had 7.38 employees per 1,000 population, and then since then it has generally dropped until actually this year with your increase of 5 employees, you'll notice that it's 6.84. But in other words, you've got less employees per 1,000 today than you had 12 years ago. That's just a fact. And does it not help a little more than just saying, oh, we've grown from 141 employees to 155 employees? Look how just that distortion is what I'm trying to give you a tool for, so that you're not blinded by big numbers or by growing numbers when you end up saying, wait a minute, you had 19,102 people back then, 22,653. If you stay on the track that you're on, how in the world are you going to serve that many more people without a few more employees? Now, probably rolling in your head is, well, how do we compare to every other city? I will tell you that I probably could give you 20 cities, but you know what? You've got to know 20 stories about why you're better, or why they're worse than you, or why they're better than you. And I don't have time, and I'm not even sure it would be helpful if you knew all those stories. But, and by the way, I've put the water and sewer employees in here. Typically, you would separate those. So this includes those. So that's one way of communicating, or the first thing you look at when the staff brings you a budget and, oh my goodness, we got X number of new employees. Or as we look forward in a minute, when we end up saying, well, if we grow at this rate, how many employees are we going to need? And by the way, population drives employees. Employees drive space requirements. It all translates to volumes and visitors in the library, and then it becomes what size library do we need to handle the growth in the next 10 years. So one piece of information, it's in the green, and I just don't know how anyone could conclude anything other than we're comparing to someone else is a fruitless effort. But comparing yourselves to yourselves makes a whole lot of sense. And so basically, you are, I would even say it's in the range. If this had turned out to be 7.5 this year compared to everything else you see, I wouldn't particularly get or draw a conclusion that that's wasteful. Because remember, every single added position is in the budget, which councils in the past have approved. Make the assumptions, they've asked questions and looked at justifications. Well, now let's take that information. Actually, we're going to put that aside, and we're going to dissect the biggest lightning rod in all municipal government, and that is property taxes. And in this case, I have recapped. I actually gave you some of this information before, but I have, in essence, recapped your tax base per capita, and then I've shown that it is a compounded annual rate of 3.91%. And please let me just stop for a second. I just have to say this. If your eye sees $93,847 per capita, and if your eye looks to the left and you say $61,000, yeah, maybe your first thing is look at that horrible, wasteful, extravagant, excessive. You go, well, but that's really a compounded 3.91%. When you end up looking at new growth, you look at revaluations, then you end up saying, well, that makes a little more sense. I've given you an idea of what your tax values have been, new values versus revaluations. And yes, it's true. Most of your tax-based growth has come from new values, not from revaluations. That was a little bit surprising to me, and then I'll show you what I use going forward. But if I know that information, then I can come to a tax levy. And so here we go, tax levy per capita, and then I adjust it for inflation. That is the only fair way to evaluate your tax base, your property tax revenue increases. So easily to distort, and it's being distorted all over the state. And I would just ask anybody in this room that if you just be fair, if this was your own business, or if you look back and you go, well, what else have you had that 10 years ago cost the same as it does today? I don't think you're going to find many things. Okay, but when we do that, I go through and show you how that breaks down into your tax levies, general fund, utility fund, your tax rate, your split of your tax rate, and then I want to show you something. This is where we discussed some of this before, but
Excuse me.
You can just...
Excuse me, Louis, did you say utility fund? I just want to make sure I heard you right.
Just employees.
Okay.
Just employees.
Thank you.
Just separately evaluate those that piece of it. Because if I was on the council, the first thing I want to know is, do we have too many? Do we, okay. But here's what I consider a gift. I did this with the idea that you would find this helpful. And if you flip it over, we're going to, in essence, say, okay, if I understand how to give Gabe and the staff some parameters, and what I do know, if it's at 6, oh, by the way, I dropped it to 6.80. Why? Because I wanted to. I just want to show you that even though it doesn't mean a lot. If you said, Gabe, show us a financial plan, but I want to see the employees at 6.80 per population. By the way, before that, you would have validated the population, and I did that. First thing I did when I took on this assignment, it says, I need a population number, and I need it to be yours, not mine. And I need it to be realistic, not, I can show you some population estimates that the state does of city governments for their own purposes, and it's just incredible how big they can get. So, if we were to build this plan, and right now you're at 155 employees, well, you could go from that to 196 by 2032. And you go, I mean, if you do what I just did, and that is, God, that's a lot of employees. And you go, it is. In fact, if this comes true, there's people in the room going, where are we going to put these employees? By the way, that's one of the reasons sometimes you've got a need for employees and you don't hire them. Fire them, where to put them. And so it gets deferred and it gets deferred. So, but here's the deal. It's 6.8 per capita, or per 1,000 capita. But I want you to see this because you're very likely to be off the council in 2032 and be looking in the news and hear people gasping. Well, in 2021, we had 157 employees, and now we're at 197 employees. What a bloated blah, blah, blah. Okay? Yes, I'm being critical because I've lived in this environment for 47 years. And you can do well if you're dealing with facts and the right perspective. But when you've got people throwing numbers and, if you want to make a big number, go back and start in 1960 and show how many employees and then how many you have today. I mean, why not go back to 1940? By the way, the oldest house in Saginaw was built in 1918, according to the tax records. I did an aging of. Okay, now let's go and do it. Let's build the forecast of tax revenues the same way, except on the other side where I dissected it and took out or adjusted for inflation, adjusted for per capita. On this side, I'm going, Gabe, read my lips, 6.80, but the 400, look about 2/3 of the way down, still in the tan, the last line on the tan. There's my $30.76. And what I'm saying is, that is going to stay the same, but we're going to roll it back up. We're going to adjust for population. We're going to adjust for inflation. And it rolls up to, go to about $10 million in 2021, up to $15.8 million. And to some extent, at that point, you would say, Gabe, anything else you're going to get, it's got to be from sales taxes, fees, fines, or as I have in one of my last slides today, this all presumes that managing so that Saginaw has got the most efficient and effective organization has nothing to do with budgeting. If you're trying to become efficient during the budget process, that is the wrong time because it takes more deep diving and more time than you've got when it comes to also preparing a budget. But I just want to show you all we're doing is we are disaggregating, breaking down the history so you can look at the key numbers and then turn around and use those as guidelines for Gabe. Now, I'm going to have to. Norton Utility decided it wanted to try to clean my computer. I've got to figure out how to get this off. Actually, interesting enough, you're able to see. Okay. Basically, I wanted to show you the game plan in numbers. I just did that. Then what I provided for you is what I call the game plan in words. That's where you would verbalize. In all of you, Councilman Beasley, you should be as equipped tonight as anyone on the city council to look at these and to some extent, don't take this too little, but to some extent going, Gabe, if you stay within these parameters, then just tell me about the big changes, the big things that we ought to be worried about. Because you've done what we've asked, and that is, keep control here. All right. As I say here, in all cases, scrubbing of line items, that's all built in. That's not a budget. That's a every day, Gabe, every day, are you asking every department head, is there ways you can do your job better? Is there ways that you can do it cheaper and so forth? Now, I can't see, because Norton has decided. If I can, let's have some fun. I mean, really, this comes right out of your audited financial statements in the statistical section. If you look back there, you just can't help but imagine what your staff has to deal with. And I don't have police calls, fire calls. I could load you up with those, and you would be impressed. But in this case, you've got 86 miles of streets, and you've added 8.1 miles of streets in this same 10-year period. You've 1,198 street lights, and you can see how much you've added. Water mains, 116 miles, and just because I wanted to have some fun with you, that's the radius, 116 miles from 333 McElroy in Saginaw, Texas. Can you imagine? You've got water lines underground. You can't see them. The soil is shifting. You don't have that many miles in the streets, but those things are aging. Did you know that if you were to stop all the growth and you stop all the travel on Saginaw streets, that you would still have a cost? They would deteriorate just by sitting in the sun and taking the rain and the soil shifts and that sort of thing. Okay. Let's see if I can get this to go away. So, did I leave anything out of the presentation? Yes, I left a whole lot out of the presentation because this is basically trying to maintain the same level of services for a bigger population with inflationary costs. But you do have, and every city has, a tremendous amount of, I didn't put it in here. Here it is. You have $129 million in just general fixed assets. From the accounting standpoint, you've depreciated 54%. Now, the reason I say from the accounting standpoint, that's not really accurate. Accounting is a straight line deterioration. That's not the way assets really deteriorate. It's exponential. For the first few years, no problem, and when they start wearing out, it's exponential. And that's where you find many, many cities chasing, they can't repair enough and replace enough to beat the racetrack here. Okay. I would like to address the questions that were, or the comments posed by Councilman Farr, and then I'm going to turn it over to all of you, and I will keep my mouth shut and let you ask questions. Okay, I included the slides, and then I've included my comments. There was a question about the rollback rate was not being proposed, and my understanding that it wasn't, and that was confirmed. You're not proposing the rollback, it's 1 penny less. So that's why I had a number that's still the correct number. The total tax bill was used instead of the general fund versus IMS, and I explained that one. The taxpayer, I wanted to show the impact of the taxpayer on a per capita basis. There was a statistic shown that the general fund levy has grown by 67% over about 10 years. And all I can say is, Councilman, you missed my whole message tonight. I am saying that is the wrong way to compare growth numbers. And I'm assuming you disagree with me, but all I can say is I stick to my explanation there. There was a term used called windfall. To me, windfall going to the general fund, that's misleading, it's inflammatory. I don't know why it was used. A year over year may be helpful, but council introduces a variety of factors. There was some year to year showing 10% one year and 15% another year and minus 1%. And just like I said, in comparisons, if you were to have 20 cities, you got to know a whole lot about all 20 cities. Well, if you compare 10 years on a year by year, I'm not saying that's not the interest, but I'd have to go to the departments. Gabe wasn't even here in many of those years. You end up going, what happened that year? I do know that there are some costs that are stair-step. They don't go up annually until you open a new wing or you open a new fire station, you add a new truck and so forth. There was a comment, double the cost for a lesser service. And Mr. Farr, I don't know, and I don't know how you would determine that there was a lesser level of service in the last 10 years. And it may be, I just would ask, how did you determine that? And then again, what's included, if we're going to compare and say, 67% over a 10-year period, well, then you go back, all right, we looked at the positions, and that's the biggest part of your budget. Were there some other things? Were there some one-time capital expenditures? Did you know in this year's budget, what is it, Kim, $400,000 and some you're spending in the general fund for a one-time project? I forget in this year, in this budget that's being proposed, there are funds being used for a capital project. It's over $400,000. Well, that's why you might have some year-to-year ups and downs. But what is it in the 10 years that anybody did wrong? You're making it sound like somebody did something wrong, or it's inflated, bloated, or whatever, and I just don't see how you come up with that. What about, there's a statement, what about the $1.5 million in general fund revenue between 2018 and 2020? And, well, I don't know, but there were 9 positions added. I think you were on the council, did you, or even if you were against the positions, council passed a budget with 9 additional positions. There was a comment about general fund revenue increase year to year. This is in the future plan, is between 4% and 5%. Yes, but I don't know what the point is. As a matter of fact, in this next one too, I lowered the future expenditure assumptions from what had been in the past. So please tell me, which way do you want it? I don't understand. Councilman, last time you jumped on me regarding
I'm sorry.
a 60-40 debt service split. No, you wanted it to be, but then you wanted a whole bunch of bonds sold. Well, you can't have it both ways. If you want to sell a lot of bonds, but you want to keep the INS tax rate at a 35% level, then that means you've got to raise the general fund, and that's exactly what you're criticizing us for. And so, please help me out. I'm just confused. And that's the end, and I'll be quiet, and I'll listen, and I'll try to respond to anything else that I can. But I'll just reiterate, I'm just trying to help. I'm trying to disclose everything that I can. And yes, I am trying to do all we can for Saginaw, as much as we can, in many ways we can. And I'm certainly not going to apologize for that.
No, Lewis, thank you. I appreciate it. A very good big picture summary and a good summary and a good explanation of a lot of these very complex issues. And I hope this helped educate the council and the public on where we have been, where we're going, and where we are today, and what some options are. So excellent, sir. So questions, council, Mary.
I just have 3 comments. One is, thank you for this, that we can see. Another one is, I don't know if I've gotten smarter, which I doubt, or if you've gotten much better at explaining things at a level that we can understand, because I believe that I understood everything you said, which was not the case early in other years.
Thank you.
And then I found it so interesting, the 116-mile radius, and that was water pipes, or what was that?
Sewer
line.
Yes.
And we are a city of 7.6 square miles. That's amazing to me. You know, that we are such a small area, and we have that many miles of any of this stuff. I just found that interesting. That's all.
You're right. Cindy?
I'd like to thank you again for the, like Mary, for the remarkable job that you did on this. You obviously put a lot of effort and thought into presenting this, so thank you very much for making it clear.
Yeah, what she said. Yeah, thank you.
I'll take it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Patrick?
I'll go after Charles. Okay. So I do want to respond to your questions that you had for me. So if we could pull the slides back up, that address the tables that had the comments on it, starting with your forecast, not the look back, but the look ahead.
Oh, the look back, I'm sorry.
No, yeah, the look ahead. We'll start with it, not the look back, but the look ahead.
Okay. This one?
Yes. If there's a way to blow that up, it'd be helpful. Maybe not.
No, I'm sure I can. I've just got to figure out, oh. Which? Put the slideshow button down next to the Zoom. You can go to slideshow mode just to show this one. Now.
Okay.
Well, I'll try to get it bigger. It'll roll off the comments.
Yeah, that's okay. And yeah, sure. But there are some numbers there that are important to look at. And what I'm showing here in your look ahead is I've taken that per capita levy and translated it to just the general fund. You'll see those red numbers there across the bottom. And you'll see that they consistently increase with population. And for that entire term, the entire 11 years, there's a 22% cost escalation over the entire 11 years. Okay? So you forecasted that there will be a 22% escalation.
That's 2% inflation per year.
Exactly, which you explained to us, right? So what you're forecasting is that in 11 years, we're going to see a 22% increase in our costs on top of our adjustments for population growth. And that's what you're reflecting here.
Did you adjust for CPI?
That's your numbers all the way across. I took your numbers all the way across. So what I'm assuming is you've adjusted that 22% for CPI. I've not added any numbers to it at all. So that clearly represents to me that over an 11-year period, you are forecasting a 22% increase in cost of service over and above the population growth. Because every year you're coming up with your ratio, essentially the per capita levy, includes the incremental increase in population every year, right?
Which is $430.76.
Completely understood.
Okay.
But if you take the same, if you divide the levy, the general fund levy, by the number of humans that are expected to be in each year, it yields that levy per capita. Okay? So what I've done is I've created the levy per capita for the general fund only. And you're showing a 2% increase every year consistent for 11 years, yielding a 22% cost inflation over an 11-year period. That's what the numbers say. That's your forecast. Okay? So what I was reflecting on is I went back to the look back. Okay? So if you'll go back to the look back on the slide.
I don't know if I can see it.
Yeah, that's the look ahead.
Oh.
So we're looking for the look back.
Okay.
That's the look back.
Okay.
So I've done the same red numbers across the bottom. So I've created the per capita levy to the general fund. And what you're going to see is that per capita, that percentage increase that I'm referring to is based upon the per capita general fund levy. Okay, it's not total revenue, it's on the per capita, as you've clearly shown in your model. And what it's showing is that from 2009 to 2010, there was a 20% spike, the largest percentage increase in our city's history. Not total levy increase, but the largest percentage increase in our city's history happened in 2010. And the way that that happened is that we kept our rate at 44 cents, but we dropped off nearly $600,000 worth of INS and backfilled it with general fund. That's what I'm talking about when I'm mentioning windfall.
Okay.
When we can hold a rate at 44 cents and we can increase our general fund by 20%, which, by the way, is almost 3 times more than what the state allows today.
You know what the components of the 2010 general fund budget were?
I can go back and look, but what the money yields there is a significant $600,000 levy increase on the general fund alone.
So what? If that was a capital project,
How's it a capital project if it's general fund? I'm not talking about INS.
you spend out of the general fund large amounts of money over the years for capital projects.
Not in 1 year. That's a 1-year change, 20%.
Where you're spending 400 and something thousand in 2020.
We're spending 400-something thousand on a 7-year loan. Is that right?
No,
What are we spending the 400,000 on?
isn't that
We've got, with not including the transfer for the Bailey Boswell project, we've got almost 700,000 in one time this year.
In one-time expenses, but what I'm suggesting here, that is not a one-time
How
expense.
do you know that?
It's because it's compounded into the next year. It grows from year to year. Look at the very next year. It's a 1% decrease. That's not ongoing.
I can't respond, although if not a capital project, it was that tied to the opening of any new facilities.
So, going across, you have a negative 1% in 2011, a plus 6% in 12, plus 2, 13, negative 1, 14, plus 7. Then you slide on over here to where we get into 2017. You got a plus 10, a plus 5, a plus 16, and a plus 10. None of those are associated with brand new facilities. We haven't opened a bridge yet. So what I'm suggesting here is that your projections into the future suggest a stable 2% per year. That averages out at almost 7% per year for the 11 years represented. Okay? And it also represents a 67% increase over 2009 costs, not 22% that you're forecasting into the future. So I have to ask, is your future projection of 22%?
Councilman Fuller, I don't have I don't have a recession in my numbers either. There will be, if not one, there will be 2 recessions between now and 2031.
Okay, but a recession would show a decline in those costs.
Exactly.
But what I'm saying is we saw a recession in 2008, and this is a 60% increase in an 11-year period. You're showing a 22% increase in an 11-year period into the future.
But all inflation.
So, okay, if it's all inflation, so what you're suggesting is we saw 3 times the inflation in this 11-year period than what you forecast for the next 11-year period. That's what I'm asking.
Well, I don't know how to explain it because you have totaled some numbers. Well, number one, we are looking at history, and the reality is up and down, up and down. You respond as a council to the needs of the citizens and others. But if I'm going to forecast, I'm generally not going to forecast up and down, up and down. I could say that there's going to be a recession which will cause a whole bunch of things to unwind, but why would I would have thought of all people, you would have been full of praise for an effort.
I'm happy with the 22%, believe me.
To constrain.
I'm very happy with the 22%. What I'm curious about is how can you look into the future 11 years and say that 22% is reasonable and look back in the past and say that 67% was okay?
Two different things.
Okay.
The 22% is 2% a year, which is the stated Federal Reserve inflation target.
Agreed.
Okay? Now going back, there's a whole bunch of things that would go into why our budget's going up and down, and we just named at least two of them. I don't know without digging into those budgets, and actually it wouldn't be the budgets, it would be the actual spending and determining what happened that year that caused, what happened in the year that caused a 1% decrease. 2 times.
There were. Factually, 2% decreases. A council body approved a budget that caused a 1% decrease.
But a council body adopted a budget that had a 16% increase.
Yes, last year. And 20% in 2010. So your question was, do I find 2.37% excessive? I do not. I find 16% excessive. I find 10% excessive.
It depends on what it's for.
If it's an ongoing expense, a 10% adjustment in the general fund, that's pretty excessive. If it's a one-time thing, I can understand that.
It happens every single year, and we've got 1,500 cities in Texas, and the hundreds of them would have that because of things that, as I said last time, somebody brought to the council, or the council themselves said, we need to do more than this, or we're behind in that. So you got to break that out if you're wanting the answer to, why so much money. And I do believe there will be things that will come up that are, your department heads, if they look back 10 years, what would they have seen that's going on today that's causing expenses? If we go into the future, it's going to be the same thing. There are going to be some things that not anybody in this room could foresee. But given the same level of service, if you will, or the staffing level, you will, and inflation, then this becomes a base plan upon which we would add things that we don't even know about, or things that the state imposes on us, or unfunded mandates. There were 6 legislative sessions in this historical picture.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be 6 legislative sessions in this plan.
Who knows?
And, who knows what would come out of those? That would end up being, the police department or the fire department or somebody saying, we didn't used to do this, but the state now, requires us to do that. So but I think you're aggregating numbers to make a point that I just don't buy.
I'm using your numbers. I'm not aggregating numbers. I'm using your numbers.
My numbers showed the compounded average growth rate.
So what you're saying is that the red numbers that are represented in the look back and the look ahead are not your numbers and your formulas?
Well, absolutely not, because my numbers said 2% and you say 22%. Well, all you've done is add 11 years of 2% inflation.
No, actually what I did, if you go to the look ahead, and I'll show you the formula, just so you know how I've gotten to that number. You take the very last number of per capita, which I think we're looking at the look back now on the screen. So the very last, if you'll go to the look ahead on your screen, because the red numbers do not appear in this handout. They only appear on that PowerPoint.
Oh,
You follow me?
yeah.
That's the look ahead. So if you take the look ahead, the last number is 335.23. That's what each human being at that point in time will pay in taxes for general fund. Okay? So that 335.23 minus the 269.61 yields a difference, right?
269.61.
That's the first year.
Beginning?
Yes.
Yes.
That's the first year. And if you divide that difference by that very first year, you come up with a 22% increase over time.
Which is 2% a year.
I'm just saying I'm not compounding. I'm doing a simple math formula, and I've explained to you how I've done it.
Okay.
And I'm using your numbers.
And I say that's a misrepresentation of what is really in that.
I'm sorry, the numbers are the numbers.
Well, yeah, but that's what I said. Go back to 1960 if you want to get a little number.
All I'm wanting to understand is your forecast. That's what I'm wanting to understand. And it tells me that you've plugged in a 22% cost increase over an 11-year period at 2% per year. Okay.
Yes.
And you've validated that. So I appreciate that. And I have to tell you, Lewis, I like what your forecast shows. And I'm certainly not knocking that. What I'm doing is I'm applying the same rules that you went into the future and looked back to say, how can we justify a 67% difference in per capita cost? So if you go to the look back again, I'll show you the same formula.
Well, if we do the look back, then we would also note that
So the very last number, 273,
okay,
71?
1 second.
Okay.
That there is a 1.77% CPI historically, or if you add that.
That's a leveler.
Times
I
12,
understand that's a
then
leveler.
You'll get a bigger number. Instead of 22, it would be less than 22, but it would still be, I don't know, 19%, something like that.
So
So which one helps you the most?
So just to be clear, it's not a matter of help. I mean,
Well, yeah,
these are pure.
I'm all about trying to help with a perspective.
So I'm answering the four questions that you had for me.
Okay.
You asked me to clarify these four things.
Okay.
So I'm on the fourth one right now, where we were talking about level of service, and I said that we're paying more for less level of service. Let me demonstrate that. If you go back to year number 1, 136.68. That's the per capita general fund. That's what every human being paid in taxes in Saginaw for the general fund. If you'll scroll up, you'll see that the population to full-time employee was 7.38. Okay? So every human being in 2009 was paying $136.68 for 7.38 employees. If you move forward to 2020, every human being will be paying $273.71 for less people, 6.84. It's double what we were paying in 2009 for less people per thousand in full-time employees.
Okay,
That's what I'm saying.
okay. Thank you.
And I'm just responding to the four questions that you had for me.
All right, let's move forward. We've been on this for a while. What else do we need to talk about?
So I've responded to his questions. The only comment I have on the look ahead
Okay.
is the only way that we can throttle a large bond program and still meet our goals, as you've coached me to say, rather than caps. So we would have to throttle how much debt service we take on from year to year. If we go to the taxpayers and ask them for a $200 million bond, Louis, you know we can't build $200 million worth of work in the next 2 years.
Right.
We aren't able to do that.
Right.
If we did $200 million worth of bond over 20 years, we can certainly keep within those goals.
No, you can't.
And if we can't, that's what I need to know.
Okay.
That's where we need to know how
The-
much
the green
can we do in
number-
20 years.
The green number on the forecast in under 2021, it is the present value of the debt service, the additional debt service stream. If you take the INS rate, keep it constant, tax base grows, existing debt goes down, you can fund approximately $40.7 million from that stream. Now, this needs to be broken down into, what you can sell and
Sure.
do in 5 years and then come back
Or
and
work
do it
off.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but that's a little bit better, and if I can use 1.4% interest rates, you can build a whole lot. You may be able to build.
That was a pretty incredible interest rate, I have to say.
Your interest rate, but basically, yes, you can do a lot with this plan, constrained, and I've just put a little bit of a damper on Gabe because it wouldn't be easy to do what I am showing here.
I don't think that it is either.
But that's what most city managers are charged with, doing all you can with what you've got, work smarter, and
Yes, sir.
and those kinds of things. But also, it would be saying no. But the no actually is the council. Ultimately, that's the council who's got to say no. And like I said, most cities don't have the staff dreaming up ways to spend money. It's coming from citizens' needs or council needs. But yes, in this plan, a little tight, and that's why it's 40 million and not 35 million or whatever the number was the last time I talked to you. But I'm trying to get everybody on the same page. No pun intended. But have it so, without knowing a whole lot, you'd be able to have. You just got a few numbers, and you know that you'll know when something gets out of bounds. And so that was my purpose, and I do think there is a good story here, and I would intentionally have built a thin enough budget to do the job you're doing today. But I don't have a recession in here. I don't have a whole ton of new programs. And again, if ask the people who would know, what are you doing today that you didn't even do 10 years ago?
How many new fire trucks do we have today we didn't have 10 years ago? How many new buildings do we have we didn't have 10 years ago? That's where that number comes from. But yeah, no, there's a lot of things that have changed, certainly.
So in order to understand what it would take to put together a robust bond program, which we're going to talk to in the next workshop, there's nothing that prevents us from going to the voters and saying we would like to see our general fund increase more than 4 to 5% per year, which you're forecasting here. We would want to see that general fund to be commensurate with whatever we're adding in terms of bond projects, right?
Right.
There's nothing that prevents us from doing that.
No.
What we've done here is we've constrained our vision to what 7 people can do.
You've turned this completely around on me. When I thought I was going to deliver something that you would.
I love it. I love it. But what I'm saying is that we've constrained this to what we 7 people can do.
Yeah.
When we can easily go to the taxpayer and say, if we want to improve McElroy, Knowles, make the park improvements, make our facility improvements in the next 20 years, And it's going to take $150 million to do that in the next
And
20
we need
years.
an 8-cent tax rate increase.
We would have to go to the voter, right?
Sure.
So what I'm wondering is, what does this model look like if we were to go to the voter and say, this is what we need to do in order to make the necessary improvements to our city over the next 20 years? This is what we'll need to do.
Okay, in your next workshop, I mean, what I don't have is the capital improvements list that you're going to try to accomplish, and then of those, if you were to have a new, and I'm just picking, if you have a new recreation center, I can tell you right now, you're going to have more operating expenses than you got debt service day one. If it's for a road, number one, it's going to be on a warranty for 2 years, and then it's probably going to be several years before
Understood.
it has any maintenance. So there's no additional immediate staff. But in your capital plan, I would suggest that you also look at what is the condition of your 116 miles.
We have a lot of aging roads that have got to be replaced.
And how much of that has got to come from, and quite frankly, to sell debt, long-term debt, to fund road repairs.
More than 40 million, I can assure you of that.
Doesn't make a lot of sense unless you're doing a complete rehab or replacement. So that's what we have to do.
Yes.
But this would stay as a base, and then
Certainly.
we talk about the additional. In your budget vernacular, it would be the supplemental packages.
And really what I see moving north would obviously be the 4590.
Oh, yeah,
It would be moving north, probably closer to 50, is what it seems like.
at least,
Yeah,
at least,
over a 20-year period.
yeah.
I mean, you're looking 11 years into the future, and I certainly appreciate cutting it off there because, like you said, we're looking into the future of 6 legislative sessions.
I
understand.
Real estate on my page.
Anyway, thank you. You've answered my question.
Thank you, Louis. All right, Charles? Mr. Beasley, sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you for this. This was my first budget. All of these different budget workshops and things I've been doing, the staff has put together these documents and the notebooks and all of those things and it helps me understand. So I'm able to follow this. I'm able to follow along. I was reviewing the slides, so I thank you for this presentation. It helped me a great deal.
Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. Appreciate it, sir. All right, moving on. Item number 10, discussion and direction regarding future bond election. For that, Assistant City Manager Dolph Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just got a text from my wife, said she's watching online, so shout out to the wife. As we discussed back in April, we're heading towards a possible bond election in May to begin some of these projects we've identified in our capital improvements program. So now we have the dollars figured out, pretty much. We have the project list figured out. So now we need to figure out how we go about selling this bond program to the citizens. So we had discussed back then possibly appointing a citizens bond committee. I know we've asked for nominees to that committee. We haven't received any as yet. So I think the first question tonight would be, is that the direction that y'all would like to go, or would you prefer to do this basically yourselves with staff, have some town hall meetings, public meetings in that type of forum? So that would be the first question. And if you do want a bond committee appointed, what would their goals and objectives be? You need to outline those, and we need to get those folks appointed. We had on the original schedule getting that process this month, so we need to get on that. The schedule I gave you back in April, Leroy, our bond counsel, has confirmed tonight that those dates are still accurate. So we would need to be ready in February to call the election for May. So let's start there. I'd like to know what the council's preference is in terms of how we proceed with this.
Mary?
I had written down some notes based on your questions in the background material, and the first one being, do we think town hall meetings or a committee would be better, or maybe both. So I'm just going to read the notes that I wrote to myself, so I won't leave anything out. I personally think town hall meetings, if we had to choose between the two, would be more effective. Since I've been on the council, we've had 2 instances where council members nominated people to be on a committee, and we've had a lot of feedback where people felt left out. And I think we have 23,000 people, and none of us know those 23,000 people. And I think a lot of them might be able to have some great ideas and or questions, but not purposely by us. Those people aren't being included. Now, we do have the problem, if we did have town hall meetings, 3 people come. I understand that. But at least make an effort and really publicize it very heavily. Have churches make announcements. Have schools make announcements. Put it in every place that we can advertise. Get flyers. It's very difficult to get the word out about anything. So I think if we made a huge effort, put some flyers in the library, rec center, maybe we would have a bigger turnout. Now, if we had a few town hall meetings and those turnouts were not good, that we didn't have a good response, maybe we could have both, and maybe we could have committees. But if we had a committee, I would like to first, and this is another thing about getting the word out, ask for volunteers. If we don't get enough volunteers, then we can add to that list of people after we determine how many people should be on the committee. Because I think a volunteer would be a person who was very interested in the subject, perhaps had some knowledge based on their background on the subject, and could do a better job of giving input. And as everybody knows, if the more people we get involved in the talking about it process, the more successful that bond election will be, in my opinion. If people felt left out of the process, they might be very likely to either not go vote or vote no. And the reason, I don't think I mentioned this. If we went with a committee either to supplement the town hall meetings or just decide to have a committee, period, if we had, which probably would not happen, but if we had more interest in that than we had positions available, like we decided there would be 10 people on the committee. I don't know how many should be on. And 40 people wanted to be on it. Then we should interview these people and pick the ones that were the most knowledgeable, had the background that would enable them to make a good contribution on that committee. Not just someone I happen to know that's my neighbor or something. Put a thing in the water bill to advertise it, Facebook's. There's some kind of email thing that some people have signed up for. I haven't signed up for that, but use that. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Mary. Cindy?
Thank you, Mayor and Dolph, for this. I kind of agree with Mary on this point of whether we do a a committee or a town hall. I'm thinking maybe a hybrid of that might be an option.
Yeah, I just want to point out, if you do have a committee, they have regular meetings, and those are open.
Right.
The public can come and make comments during those meetings, and so it's open to any citizen who wants to come and sit in on those meetings. So, like Mary said, it's just a matter of getting folks to participate.
And I think when we had the Citizen Summit, about half the people that agreed to come showed up, but there were still several others that said that they wish they could participate. So I guess that was a different situation. But yeah, I would like to see it open and, let people voice their opinions. Looking at the, the funding, setting the limits, for the next few years. While I agree that should be done, I'd also like to look at some of the options. The gentleman came in and talked to us about the municipal planning. I think his numbers were outrageously high. I'd like to be able to see what we could trim from some of that. $400,000 for a covered walkway between City Hall and the library, I think is something that could be chopped off pretty quick.
Sure, those are worst case scenario numbers,
I understand.
But things like, for instance, the fire station are based on current square foot costs. I know that's a big number. That's a shocking number. But
right.
I had a conversation with the chief in another city, and he budgeted exactly the same thing for his because that's what they're seeing in the market. So what you're going to end up doing in order to trim those costs down is you're going to be looking at a different footprint of the building.
Right.
You're going to look at a smaller facility. And those are all things that can be worked out in the process.
Right. So, and I understand that with the dispatch, the emergency services, we're looking at a decrease in that $14.5 million on the fire station anyway.
It wasn't included in that.
Oh, it
proposal.
wasn't? Oh.
That's correct.
So-
the square footage was not included in that.
Okay.
Mayor and council, we are not even to the point of designing a facility or any other project. I just want to make that abundantly clear. We would show a town hall meeting, the public, or a bond committee the general information. Here's the space needs, like you recall from a couple meetings ago about Knowles. We've done a concept plan. We know broadly what the costs are, but we're not into the point where we're designing and we have, hard costs. So roughly, Councilmember Farr and I, we go to lunch regularly, which I really like because he pays most of the time. Let's not disturb that. But about 10% of any project cost is just startup and getting you
Soft cost.
Soft cost with design. So what I say all that because we'll control the costs, but we've designed nothing yet. We need to identify the projects in priority first.
And I agree with that to a point. I think there's things that have been presented that people, at least citizens that I've talked to, have said, I don't think we need that. Bathrooms in the little neighborhood parks.
Sure.
We don't need those. And those are expensive costs that I think we can, easily remove, which would allow us to accomplish more. So, $30 million for a bond election, we can either do a little or do a lot, depending on how our designs go and the input of the citizens, if they want a traffic circle at Knowles and McElroy or not. That's a huge expense. And I think that answers pretty much the third question and the fourth one as well. So letting people's opinions on what they want in the designs, I think, is going to be important in what the final outcome will be.
All right, thanks, Cindy. Charlie?
I think we have to give the citizens of Saginaw a chance in a open forum type deal to give us their opinions of what they would like to see. If they don't want to show up, then, they've given away that opportunity. But you have to give it to them. And I agree with Cindy and and Mary. Yeah, whatever your name is. We've got a lot to do with a little money. And we need to do the best we can with what we've got. So,
What are your thoughts on a committee, yes or no?
I think it wouldn't hurt to have a, kind of like we did the Citizens Summit that time. Most of us, the city council, most of us were there, and we sit at the tables and doing that and got feedback from them. But yeah, soon enough, you're going to have to elect some governing body to sit through it and make decisions on where we want to go. So that's all I've got.
Yes, Mary.
When I spoke before, I was only addressing question 1. That's what I thought we were doing. So can I address question 2, 3, and 4? Question 2, I would like, if at all possible, to keep within the existing tax rate, because I think that would give it a better chance of being approved. I would love to do everything we could think of that would be so wonderful, but I think all of us know we can't. So yes, keep the existing tax rate, which is kind of the same answer for number 4 or number 3. And then as far as balancing projects, need has to take precedence, in my opinion. And then number 2, I hate to use the term nice to have because that makes it sound like, well, we don't really need that. But we need all of these things. But some would be not as urgent as others. And then number 3, I wonder if some small part of some of these projects, such as maybe 1 or 2 of the parks, of the small parks, perhaps could be funded within the city budget in any given year, perhaps. And that would be a way to take them out of the bond election. That's all.
Thank you, Mary. On the subject of committee, I think we need a committee. I think absolutely a committee. I think somebody's got to do the hard and the down and dirty work. You can get feedback from a lot of different sources. Maybe we do a committee and we also have a town hall, but I think we have to have a committee of citizens to do some of the prioritization and get the real hard numbers and the hard projects, because choice will have to be made. As you mentioned, it's priorities. We have lots of different needs, and there's have to be prioritized. How do you rank them? That's the big question, and then make that recommendation. I think I'm a big fan of a committee. I think it's worked well for us in the past. So do that. Then maybe we work a way to have a additional citizen summit or something along the way to get more feedback. That's my thoughts.
So we have got to be thinking 50 years, not 5 years. What has happened in this city is just from its incorporation back in 85 to today is we have continued to look 5 years into the future in our planning. If we're not looking 50 years into the future, we're selling ourselves short. What we just talked about in terms of a downturn in the economy, what everyone in this room has to realize is that in a downturn in the economy, that is when we get our best bang for the buck in the construction market. We don't get our best bang for the buck in the peak of the economy. In fact, we get half of what we should get because nobody is there to do the work. They're all busy in other places. And quite frankly, they're not in the city building business. They're out building buildings they can make money at, private sector. So if we're not thinking about a way to capture all of the projects that we see in the foreseeable future, and I'm telling you all, I believe that 20 years is a foreseeable future for us. It's 20 years. We may not be on the council, but we need to be planning for the next council and get them in the catbird seat ready to pull the trigger on projects when we have a downturn in the economy. We don't need to build fire stations when the economy is booming. I'm sorry, Chief, but you're going to get half what you should get if you pull the trigger on that fire station and the CPI that we've been talking about is at its peak. Right now, we're still in a booming economy. I do see that within 2 years, we have the opportunity to pull the trigger on a lot of great projects in this city and do it in a downturn in the economy and take advantage of that for our taxpayers. And the only way that we can do that is to ask our citizens to trust us, arm us with the opportunity to have in the till a $200 million pocketbook. It doesn't mean we're going to spend $200 million tomorrow. But if we have the rules set in place where we can spend that $200 million over time, 10, 15, 20 years from now, that's an issuance of $10 million of debt per year for 20 years. And that puts us in a great position to capitalize on market upturns and downturns. In a market upturn, just before we see a downturn, we're going to see improvements in cost and design. Because guess who gets first in the construction industry hit? The design teams. There's nobody looking for work to design anymore. And the work that's already under construction, the contractors are hoping they get paid when the downturn in the economy happens. So we have enjoyed a great economy for the last now 9 years. And I'm like Lewis. I don't see that lasting another 3 or 4 years. We've got to be put in a position to take advantage of the downturn. And where I stand on committee versus town hall, I'm kind of, I don't want to say I'm indifferent, but I've served on 3 bond committees in this region in the last 10 years, over the 3 largest bond programs passed in the last 3 years. I have never seen a bond pass on a town hall, ever. And if we want to try that, I see it as a test case. I really see that we are in an opportunity to go to our citizens and tell them we have $60 million to $80 million worth of road projects that are right in front of us that we need to get shovel ready. We need to have them designed and ready to go. We have at least $60 million worth of facility improvements, at least. And we've got somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think, what did I hear, $30 million worth of potential park projects. Those are key areas that we need to be preparing ourselves for over the next 20 years and not be planning on a nickel and dime 5-year plan. And I'm sorry to characterize it that way, but you know what? If our school districts thought that way, there'd be kids sitting in tents in classrooms. They have to be thinking 15, 20 years ahead just to bank for schools to be on the ground. We've got to be thinking ahead. And I know it sounds robust, but I think we need to be looking at a $150 to $200 million bond program, and we need to get our citizens excited about it. And we have to tell them this is only one opportunity that we get when we're right here on the crest of a potential downturn. And that downturn is something we've got to take advantage of. So those are my thoughts on questions 1, 2, 3, 4.
As far as town halls versus the committees, I've been on a committee. I was on a committee for 10 years, so I think committees work fine. I would also like to see a town hall just to get the input from the voters and things like that. As far as the other questions, I really don't have any input. I just figure we just wait until it's passed, and then we figure out what we're going to do with it then, and adjust as we go, as far as what to remove, what to add, and things like that. That's all.
Charles? Yes, sir. All right. I think you got direction for a committee.
Okay, Mayor, I was thinking we would do something similar to what we did with the Charter Election Commission.
Mm-hmm.
You supply names, we appoint people, outline their goals and objectives. Certainly, we'd have several meetings with them over the next few months, get their recommendations prepared for y'all, And then at some point, y'all will have to make the decision what we actually take to the voters. And of course, during that time, we're absolutely going to have a town hall meeting, opportunities for people to come up and look at the projects y'all are recommending. We can have an open house separate from a council meeting. There's all kinds of options we could do with this. But if we're going to have a committee, we need to get started on that immediately because the schedule calls for them to begin reviewing projects in September. And our next meeting is September 3rd. So we need a list of folks that would be interested. We can certainly put information on the website saying we're looking for volunteers, get the word out. But I think it would be best for council to recommend however many, 2 people each, maybe have a committee of 14. Again, these will be open meetings. Anyone can attend, but we'll have a committee formed, and then we're able to provide them with the information. Also, once their recommendations are done, the council's made a decision, they can be ambassadors for these projects. We can provide them with the information they need to make presentations to civic clubs, whatever group would like to hear it. It's difficult for staff to participate. We can't be advocating one way or the other. Right. But these could be our ambassadors for these projects. So if the council's in agreement, that's probably the way we can go.
Okay. Everybody okay with nominating some folks, a couple folks? However you want to go about finding your people is up to you, but give the couple names to Dolph in the next week or so. Everybody do that?
May I make a suggestion, Dolph? What do we have, 5 homeowners associations now in the city? Viable homeowners associations? It would be a very good idea for the city to write a written invitation to those homeowner association presidents to participate because they have direct access through their organizations to get out the vote and to communicate the needs or wishes of their respective associations.
Okay. And I like the idea, Dolph, you mentioned of maybe an open house as opposed to a town hall, an open house presenting projects. I think that's a great way to show these are potential projects. We're not saying we're going to do them all, but this is what we have needs for, and to show pictures and representation of what it would entail. I think that would really help folks understand what we're asking for. So it's a good idea. Everybody good?
Good.
All right. Gabe,
Great
anything
work.
else? All right. Then at 8:13, we can be back in the regular session. No more executive session. I'll move to
Mr.
adjourn.
Mayor, I move we adjourn.
Patrick? Cindy, second. All those in favor? 8:13, we're done. Todd Flippo. Did I miss one? A couple. Sorry.